You walked into the same room you've walked into 100 times before. Same people, same setting. But something was different, not in the room, in how people looked at you. Last month, they barely acknowledged your presence. Today, 3 separate people initiated conversation with you. 2 weeks ago, your opinions were interrupted or ignored. Today, people actually waited for you to finish speaking. Nothing about your external circumstances changed. You didn't get promoted. You didn't win the lottery. You didn't transform your appearance. The only thing that shifted was internal. You stopped chasing their approval, and somehow everyone felt it. If you've experienced this strange phenomenon, what I'm about to explain will make everything make sense. Stay with me. There's a psychological phenomenon that nobody talks about because it contradicts everything we've been taught about social dynamics. We're told that to get respect, you need to earn it through achievement. To get attention, you need to be impressive. To get included, you need to pursue connection. All of that is backwards. The truth is simpler and stranger. People treat you differently, not based on what you do, but based on what you need from them. When you stop chasing validation, approval, inclusion, attention, or connection, something shifts in how people perceive and respond to you, not because you've become better or more valuable, but because you've stopped telegraphing need. And humans, whether consciously or not, are wired to respond to need signals in specific ways. This video breaks down exactly what changes in how people treat you when you stop chasing. We're covering 5 specific social dynamics that flip completely when you withdraw your pursued energy. Each one is backed by social psychology research, but more importantly, each one is something you've probably experienced without understanding why. By the end, you'll see your past interactions in a completely new light, and you'll understand why the less you chase, the more people chase you. Let's break it down. Shift 1. The attention paradox. When you're chasing, you're constantly trying to be noticed. You speak up more in groups. You laugh louder at jokes. You share achievements hoping someone will acknowledge them. You position yourself where you'll be seen. You craft social media posts designed to generate engagement. Everything you do is engineered to capture attention because you've made attention your measure of worth. But here's what actually happens. The more you seek attention, the less you receive it. Not because people are cruel, but because attention-seeking behavior triggers an instinctive social response in others. Humans are wired to notice what's scarce and overlook what's abundant. When you're constantly available, constantly present, constantly contributing, you become background noise. Your presence becomes expected rather than notable. Think about that person in every group who always talks, always has a story, always jumps into every conversation. How much attention do they actually receive? People tune them out, not consciously, but neurologically. Their brain categorizes that person's voice as constant input and filters it to background processing. Meanwhile, the person who rarely speaks, but occasionally offers insight, everyone goes quiet when they talk. That's the attention paradox. When you stop chasing attention, a strange inversion occurs. Your silence becomes notable, your absence becomes felt, your occasional contributions become valued because they're rare. You're no longer competing for attention, which paradoxically makes you more attention-worthy. People start wondering what you're thinking. They notice when you don't respond. They ask for your opinion specifically because you're not offering it unsolicited. This isn't strategy. This is what naturally happens when you stop operating from need. The person who needs attention repels it. The person who doesn't need attention attracts it, not because people are backwards, but because attention-seeking broadcasts insecurity and attention indifference broadcasts security, and humans are evolutionarily wired to be drawn to security. But the attention paradox is just the beginning, because when you stop chasing attention, something even more powerful shifts in how people perceive your value. Shift 2. The value recalibration. Here's something most people never consciously realize. We don't assign value to people based on their objective worth. We assign value based on their apparent scarcity and their willingness to walk away. This is basic economics applied to social dynamics. And when you stop chasing, you trigger an automatic value recalibration in everyone who knows you. When you were chasing, your behavior communicated specific things. You were always available, which signaled low demand. You were always accommodating, which signaled low standards. You were always flexible, which signaled lack of better options. You were always pursuing, which signaled that you valued the relationship more than they did. Every one of these signals lowered your perceived value, not because you were actually less valuable, but because humans use availability and effort as value heuristics. The The moment you stop chasing, these heuristics flip. Suddenly you're not always available. That signals high demand. You're not always accommodating. That signals high standards. You're not always flexible. That signals you have options. You're not pursuing. That signals equal or possibly higher value. None of these conclusions are conscious. They happen automatically in the social calculation centers of people's brains. This is why people who were lukewarm toward you when you were chasing suddenly become interested when you stop. Their value assessment of you has changed, not because you changed objectively, but because the signals you're sending have changed. You've gone from abundant to scarce, from low value to high value, from pursuer to pursued, and that shift changes everything. You'll see this in specific behaviors. People who rarely initiated contact start reaching out. People who took days to respond start responding quickly. People who gave you minimal effort start putting in real effort. People who took you for granted start trying to lock down your time. It looks like they suddenly realized your worth, but what actually happened is simpler. You stopped signaling that you're easy to access and easy to lose. Scarcity increased perceived value, but value recalibration triggers something else, something that explains why your opinions suddenly carry more weight. Shift 3. The credibility elevation. This one is counterintuitive, but consistent. When you stop chasing approval, people start taking your words more seriously. The exact same opinion that was dismissed or debated when you were chasing suddenly gets accepted or considered thoughtfully when you stop. Your credibility elevates not because your ideas improved, but because your relationship to approval changed. Here's the psychology. When someone perceives that you need their approval, they unconsciously discount what you say, not maliciously, but automatically. They categorize your words as potentially biased by your need to please them. Every opinion you offer gets filtered through. Is he saying this because he believes it, or because he wants my approval? That filter reduces credibility, but when you clearly don't need their approval, that filter disappears. Your words are taken at face value because there's no perceived ulterior motive. You're not trying to impress them. You're not trying to win them over. You're not trying to fit in. You're just stating what you actually think. And paradoxically, that makes people more likely to value what you think. You'll notice this in meetings, group conversations, and even casual interactions. When you were chasing, people would interrupt you, talk over you, or quickly move on from your points. Now, they let you finish, they ask follow-up questions, they reference your ideas later, they attribute insights to you. The content of what you're saying hasn't changed, the delivery hasn't changed. What changed is the energy behind it. You're speaking from conviction rather than from need, and conviction has weight that need lacks. This credibility elevation extends beyond just your words. It affects how people interpret your actions, your decisions, and your character. When you were chasing, people questioned your motives. Why is he being so nice? What does he want? Now, when you do something kind, it's received as genuine because you're not doing it to earn approval. When you set a boundary, it's respected because you're not doing it to manipulate. Your entire character gets reinterpreted through a lens of authenticity rather than need. But credibility elevation triggers another shift, one that changes the entire power dynamic in your relationships. Shift 4. The respect inversion. Respect and pursuit have an inverse relationship that most people discover too late. The more you chase someone, the less they respect you. The less you chase, the more respect you command. This isn't a moral statement about whether people should respect those who pursue them. It's an observation about human psychology as it actually operates. When you're chasing, you're demonstrating that the other person has something you need: their approval, their inclusion, their validation, their presence. By definition, this creates a power imbalance. They have what you want, you don't have what they want, or they'd be chasing you. That imbalance produces disrespect, not because people are cruel, but because respect flows toward power, not away from it. Think about people you respect deeply. How many of them were chasing your approval? Probably none. The people you respect are the ones who don't seem to need your respect. They're secure in themselves. They have clear standards. They're willing to disagree with you. They don't adjust their behavior to accommodate your mood. That's not arrogance. That's self-respect. And self-respect generates respect from others. When you stop chasing, you signal self-respect. You communicate that you value your own time, energy, and attention, enough not to give it freely to people who don't reciprocate. You demonstrate that you have standards for how you're treated. You show that you're willing to walk away from situations that don't serve you. All of this triggers respect in others because you're respecting yourself. You'll see this respect inversion in how people speak to you, how they treat your time, how they respond to your boundaries, and how they include you in decisions. When you were chasing, people felt comfortable disrespecting you, canceling plans last minute, being vague about commitment, taking hours or days to respond, making decisions without your input. They knew you'd accept it because you needed the relationship more than they did. But when you stop chasing, suddenly that behavior stops. People confirm plans in advance. They're clear about their intentions. They respond promptly. They consult you before making group decisions. Not because you demanded better treatment, but because your behavior communicated that you expect it. You're no longer accepting disrespect, which means people stop offering it. The respect inversion also changes how people apologize to you, how they speak about you when you're not present, and how they defend you in conflicts. When you were chasing, you were dispensable. Now you're valued, and valued people get treated with respect. But respect inversion creates space for something unexpected, something that changes your entire social experience. Shift 5. The relationship filter. This is the shift that matters most long term. When you stop chasing, you don't just change how people treat you, you change which people remain in your life. The relationship filter activates automatically, removing people who only valued you for what you provided and retaining people who valued you for who you are. This filter is brutal but necessary. Here's how it works. When you're chasing, you're attracting and maintaining relationships with people who enjoy being chased. These are people who like having their egos stroked, who enjoy one-sided dynamics, who are comfortable receiving without reciprocating. They're not necessarily bad people, they're just people who benefit from the dynamic you are creating. When you stop chasing, that benefit disappears. And so do they. You'll notice this when certain people suddenly become busy, when you stop initiating all contact, when friends who you always reached out to never reach back when you go quiet, when romantic interests who loved your attention ghost, when you stop providing it. This isn't rejection, this is revelation. These people were never truly connected to you. They were connected to what you were doing for them. The filter works both ways. While it removes people who only wanted pursuit, it reveals people who actually value you. These are the people who notice when you pull back and check in genuinely, the people who respect your new boundaries and still maintain connection, the people who appreciate that you've stopped chasing them because they never wanted to be chased, they wanted mutual respect, and now they're getting it. The relationship filter is uncomfortable because it usually means your social circle shrinks temporarily, you lose quantity, but what you gain is quality. Every relationship that survives the filter is a relationship built on something real. Mutual respect, genuine interest, actual reciprocity. These are the relationships worth having, and you couldn't see which relationships were real until you stopped chasing. Long term, the relationship filter creates a life where you're surrounded by people who choose you, not people you convince to tolerate you, where interactions energize you rather than drain you, where connection is mutual rather than one-sided, where you can be yourself rather than perform. That's the ultimate shift, from quantity of relationships to quality of relationships. All 5 shifts, attention paradox, value recalibration, credibility elevation, respect inversion, and relationship filter, stem from one underlying mechanism, the end of need-based interaction. When you're chasing, every interaction is contaminated by need. You need approval, you need validation, you need inclusion, you need connection. That need leaks into everything you do and say, and people feel it. Need triggers specific reactions in others. It creates discomfort because it places an unspoken obligation on them. It generates contempt because humans instinctively devalue what appears desperate. It breeds manipulation because both parties are playing games. You're trying to get needs met without appearing needy. They're trying to extract benefits without committing. Need-based interaction is fundamentally transactional, even when it's disguised as relationship. When you stop chasing, you stop operating from need. You interact from preference rather than necessity. I enjoy your company rather than I need your approval. I choose to spend time with you rather than I need you to include me. I value this connection rather than I need this connection to feel worthy. The shift from need to preference changes the entire energetic foundation of your interactions. People respond to preference completely differently than they respond to need. Preference is flattering because it's voluntary. Need is burdensome because it feels obligatory. Preference creates space and attraction. Need creates pressure and resistance. Preference allows the other person to show up authentically. Need forces them into a role. When you interact from preference, people relax, they feel safe, they show you their real selves. And that's when genuine connection becomes possible. This is why stopping the chase doesn't just change how people treat you, it changes the quality of human interaction you experience. You go from performing for approval to being yourself, from managing impressions to expressing truth, from seeking validation to offering value. From taking energy to exchanging energy, the entire game changes when you're not playing from need. Here's what most people don't realize about stopping the chase. Once you experience the shift in how people treat you, you can't go back. Not because you're trying to maintain a tactic, but because you've seen behind the curtain. You understand how the social game actually works, and once you understand, performing the old behaviors feels impossible. You can't chase approval from people who only respect you when you don't need their approval. You can't pursue people who only value you when you're scarce. You can't perform for credibility from people who only believe you when you're not trying to convince them. The entire pursuit-based approach to relationships reveals itself as self-defeating, and you can't unknow that. This creates a permanent shift in your social orientation. You move from external to internal validation, from seeking to selecting, from convincing to attracting, from performing to being. It's not a strategy you're executing, it's a fundamental reorientation of how you relate to others and yourself. You stop asking, what do I need to do to get them to like me? And start asking, do I actually enjoy this person's company? The permanent shift also changes your relationship with solitude. When you were chasing, being alone felt like failure. Social rejection felt devastating. Not being included felt like proof of unworthiness. But when you stop chasing and experience how differently people treat you, solitude becomes valuable. It's your baseline, your peace, the place you return to between choosing connections rather than desperately seeking them. This doesn't mean you become a hermit or antisocial. It means you become genuinely social rather than performatively social. You engage because you want to, not because you need to. You connect from wholeness rather than from lack, and that wholeness is what makes you magnetic. People can feel the difference between someone who needs them and someone who chooses them. Everyone wants to be chosen, nobody wants to be needed. Before you decide to stop chasing, understand this. The transition period is uncomfortable. When you first stop chasing, before the shifts kick in, there's a gap. People who are used to your pursuit energy will pull back. Your social calendar might empty. Your phone might go quiet. Your sense of connection might feel threatened. This gap makes most people panic and resume chasing. Don't. The gap is necessary. It's the clearing of relationships that only existed because you were maintaining them unilaterally. It's the revelation of who was actually interested versus who was just accepting your energy. It's the space where you build internal validation, so you don't need external validation. If you can't sit in that gap, you'll never experience the shifts on the other side. The gap typically lasts longer than you'd like, but shorter than you fear. For most people, 2 to 8 weeks. During that time, you need to resist every urge to check in, reach out, or resume old patterns just to ease the discomfort. Let the silence teach you. Let the solitude strengthen you. Let the gap reveal who and what was real. On the other side of that gap is a completely different social experience, but you have to trust the process. Also, understand, not everyone will treat you better when you stop chasing. Some people will treat you worse, or disappear entirely. That's the filter working. Those are the people who only related to you through dominance dynamics. They enjoyed being chased. Your pursuit fed their ego. When you stop, they lose interest because they were never interested in you. They were interested in the supply you provided. Let them go. They're revealing themselves. That's valuable information. When you stop chasing, people treat you differently because you're different, not externally, internally. You've shifted from seeking validation to being self-validated, from needing approval to having standards. From pursuing connection to selecting connection, from performing value to knowing value. That internal shift broadcasts through every interaction, every word, every silence. And people respond to it instinctively. The attention paradox, value recalibration, credibility elevation, respect inversion, and relationship filter aren't tactics you deploy. They're natural consequences of you no longer operating from need. You don't make them happen. They happen when you stop preventing them by chasing. All you have to do is stop chasing and let human psychology run its course. If you're watching this because you're tired of chasing and you're ready to see what happens when you stop, I respect that. It takes courage to step back from patterns you've relied on, even when those patterns don't work. But understand, you're not giving up on connection. You're giving up on pursuing people who don't pursue you back. And in that surrender, you create space for the kind of relationships that don't require chase at all. The kind where both people show up because they want to, not because one person is dragging the other forward. The shifts I've described aren't guaranteed for everyone, but they're guaranteed for people who genuinely stop chasing and sit with the discomfort that follows. If you can do that, if you can be alone with yourself long enough to build internal validation, if you can resist the urge to resume old patterns when the gap feels uncomfortable, you will experience a different social reality, one where you're valued rather than tolerated, chosen rather than chased, respected rather than used. Subscribe if this resonated, comment where you are in this process, and remember, people don't treat you based on who you are, they treat you based on what you signal you'll accept. Stop accepting less than mutual respect, and watch how the world adjusts.